The ground shook violently beneath Ambassador Kyle Morrison's feet as another explosion lit up the darkening sky. Through the reinforced windows of the emergency command center, he could see massive fireballs blooming across the capital city. Buildings that had stood for thousands of years were now nothing but twisted metal and smoking ruins. "How many ships made it out?" Kyle asked, his voice barely steady as he gripped the edge of the control panel. Technical Officer Lisa Park's hands moved frantically across her display screens. 43 evacuation transports cleared the atmosphere, sir. But the Krotok fighters are hunting them down one by one. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "We've lost contact with 7 ships already." Kyle closed his eyes for a moment, trying to block out the sounds of his dying world. The Villani had always been peaceful people. Their greatest achievement wasn't in weapons or warfare, but in art, music, and philosophy. They had spent the last 3,000 years creating beauty instead of destruction. Now that peaceful nature was going to get them all killed, the Krotak Empire had arrived 6 months ago with a simple message: submit completely or die. There were no negotiations, no compromises, no middle ground. The Krotak didn't want to rule the Villani. They wanted their planet's rare minerals, and the Villani were just an inconvenience to be removed. "Sir, incoming transmission from the Krotak." "Flagship," Lisa announced, her face pale as death. On the main screen, the cruel face of General Vex appeared. His dark eyes showed no emotion as he spoke. "People of Villani, you now have 68 hours to surrender. After that time, we will begin the final bombardment. The world will be cleansed of all life, and our mining operations will begin. This is your last chance to die with dignity." The transmission cut off, leaving the command center in terrible silence. Kyle looked around at his remaining staff, 12 people trying to coordinate the evacuation of an entire planet. It was hopeless, and they all knew it. "All right, what about the other galactic powers?" asked Communications Officer Brad Wilson, desperation clear in his voice. "The Zephyrian Alliance? It's a cosmic federation? Someone has to help us." Lisa shook her head sadly. "I've been monitoring their channels, sir. The Zephyrians say it's not their sector. The Federation called it an unfortunate regional conflict. The Stellar Republic won't even answer our calls." Kyle felt his heart sink. The great civilizations of the galaxy, with their mighty fleets and advanced technology, were going to let an entire peaceful species die because it wasn't convenient to help. The Villani had never made enemies, never threatened anyone, never even raised their voices in anger. But now, when they needed friends the most, they found themselves completely alone. "Sir," Lisa said quietly, "there is one option left." Kyle turned to her with tired eyes. "What option?" "We've contacted every major power in 15 sectors. The quantum beacon, sir. We could send a broad-spectrum distress call across all known space. Not just to the big civilizations, but to everyone. Every species, every world, every station." "That would take enormous power," Brad pointed out. "We'd have to drain the backup generators. If this doesn't work, we won't have enough energy left to power the shields during the final attack." Kyle stared at the tactical display showing Krotok ships positioning themselves for the killing blow. His people were dying, his world was burning, and the so-called civilized galaxy had turned its back on them. What choice did they have? "The quantum beacon uses our most advanced technology," Kyle said slowly. "The message will reach species we've never even heard of. Some might be even worse than the Krotok. Some might be better," Lisa replied softly. Kyle walked to the massive beacon control panel. His ancestors had built this device to communicate with distant stars, to share knowledge and friendship across the void. Now he was going to use it to beg strangers for help. "Power up the beacon," he ordered. "Send this message to every corner of the galaxy. We are the Villani people. We are peaceful. We are dying. If anyone out there believes that innocent life has value, please help us. We have 72 hours before our world ends." The beacon hummed to life, drawing power from every system in the facility. The message burst outward at incredible speed, racing through hyperspace toward distant worlds and unknown civilizations. 3 weeks later, far across the galaxy, That desperate cry for help reached a small blue planet, where a species called humans was just learning to walk among the stars. Retress. The deep underground war room at the Pentagon had never been this quiet. Admiral Jack Harrison watched the faces around the massive oak table as the alien message played for the third time. The desperate voice of Ambassador Kyle Morrison echoed through the speakers, begging for help from anyone who would listen. President Rachel Davis sat at the head of the table, her fingers drumming silently on the polished wood. She had been in office for 2 years, dealing with everything from economic crises to natural disasters. But this was different. This was a dying alien civilization asking Earth for help. "Turn it off," she said quietly. The recording stopped, leaving only the hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of Washington traffic far above their heads. "General?" Mike Thompson cleared his throat. "Madame President, I need to be clear about what we're discussing here. This isn't some rescue mission to save a few people. We're talking about traveling halfway across the galaxy to fight an empire that has conquered dozens of star systems."
Ow.
"Long would it take our fleet to reach them?" the President asked. Admiral Harrison pulled up a holographic star map. 3 months minimum, assuming our new hyperspace drives don't break down. That's pushing our technology to its absolute limits. "And the enemy?" Defense Secretary Janet Cooper asked. "What do we know about these Krotok people?" Admiral Harrison switched the display to show intelligence reports. "According to the message in our deep space scans, they're a militaristic empire. They've been expanding for centuries, conquering peaceful worlds, and stripping them of resources. Their fleet is at least 10 times larger than ours." General Thompson leaned forward. "Let me make this perfectly clear. Our entire space navy consists of 57 ships. Most of them are barely 5 years old, and we've never fought a real space battle. We're talking about going up against an empire that's been conquering worlds since before America was founded." The room fell silent again. Everyone knew the numbers didn't look good. "What about our allies?" asked Secretary of State Robert Kim, the European Space Consortium. "The Pacific Alliance Fleet?" "Already asked," Admiral Harrison replied. "The Europeans. Think we're crazy? The Pacific Alliance won't commit without UN approval, and that could take months. The Russians and Chinese won't even return our calls." President Davis stood up and walked to the large screen showing the Villani homeworld. In the images transmitted, with the distress call, she could see burning cities and fleeing civilians. It reminded her of old footage from World War II, when entire populations were running from advancing armies. "Ma'am, with respect," General Thompson continued, "this isn't our fight. These aliens are complete strangers. We don't owe them anything. Our first duty is to protect Earth and American citizens." "And what happens when this Krotok empire finishes with the Villani?" the President asked. "They've conquered dozens of worlds already. How long before they start looking at Earth?" "Admiral?" Harrison nodded. "The President has a point, General. Our intelligence suggests the Krotok expand in all directions. If we don't stop them now, we might face them later when they're even stronger." "But we'd be fighting alone," Thompson insisted. "Every major galactic civilization has ignored this. Distress call. The advanced species with fleets of thousands of ships won't help. But we're supposed to?" President Davis turned back to face the room. "Maybe that's exactly why we should go. Because we're the only ones who will." She walked back to her chair, but remained standing. "I've read the reports about how other species see us. They call Earth a death world. They think we're violent and primitive because we grew up fighting hurricanes, earthquakes, and each other. Maybe they're right about the violent part." Secretary Cooper raised her hand. "Madam President, the political implications alone, Janet." "I don't care about politics right now," the President interrupted. "There's a world full of innocent people about to die, and they asked us for help. Not the Galactic Federation with their 1,000-ship fleets. Not the advanced civilizations with their perfect technology. They asked us." Admiral Harrison checked his tablet. "Ma'am, I have preliminary deployment numbers. We could mobilize 57 combat vessels, including our 3 newest dreadnoughts. It would take 48 hours to fully crew and supply." "Them? What about volunteers?" the President asked. "That's the surprising part," the Admiral replied with a slight smile. "When word leaked about the distress call, we had over 50,000 military personnel volunteer for the mission. Space Marines, Navy crews, pilots, engineers, everyone wants to go. General Thompson looked shocked. 50,000 volunteers? For a mission they might not come back from? General, you're forgetting something important, President Davis said, as she finally sat down. Americans have never been good at walking away from a fight, especially when innocent people need help. Our grandfathers stormed the beaches at Normandy to save people they'd never met.
Ow.
Our great-grandfathers crossed an ocean to fight in the trenches of France. She looked around the table at each person. This might be space instead of an ocean, and aliens instead of Europeans. But the principle is the same. When good people are in trouble, we help. That's what we do. The vote was unanimous. Within 6 hours, the largest military fleet in human history was preparing for a journey into the unknown to fight a war that wasn't theirs against an enemy that outnumbered them 10-1. As news of the mission spread across Earth, something unexpected happened. Instead of protests or fear, there was pride. Humanity was finally taking its place among the stars. Not as traitors or diplomats, but as the species that showed up when others needed help. The bridge of the destroyer Arizona shook violently as Captain Dan Rodriguez brought his ship out of hyperspace. His tactical display immediately exploded with red warning lights. Dozens of enemy vessels scattered across the Villani system like angry hornets around a nest. Jesus Christ, whispered Navigation Officer Tony Walsh, staring at his screens. There must be over 200 Crodoc ships out there. Captain Rodriguez gripped his command chair as another massive explosion lit up the view screen. In the distance, he could see the beautiful blue-green world of Villani Prime, its surface dotted with fires from orbital bombardment. Crotoc battleships hung in space like massive metal vultures, raining death down on the helpless planet below. We're getting emergency transmissions from the surface, Communications Officer Betty Ross reported. The Villani are saying their shields will fail within hours. They're begging us to help evacuate the civilians.
What?
Rodriguez looked at the impossible odds on his display. 57 human ships against over 200 Crotoc vessels. The enemy ships were larger, more advanced, and had been fighting wars for centuries. By every logical calculation, the humans should have turned around and gone home. Captain Rodriguez, this is Admiral Harrison, came the steady voice over the fleet communication channel. I see those odds on your screen. See those burning cities down there. I see a bunch of bullies who think they can pick on innocent people. Rodriguez smiled grimly. He had served under Admiral Harrison for 8 years, and he knew that tone of voice. Someone was about to have a very bad day. All units, this is Admiral Harrison. The Admiral's voice boomed across all channels.
We didn't travel 3 months through space to have a conversation.
These Crotoc want to fight? Let's give them one they'll never forget. All ships attack. The human fleet surged forward like a pack of wolves. The Crotoc forces, caught completely off guard, scrambled to respond. Commander Vex aboard the massive Crotoc flagship Devastator watched in disbelief as the tiny human fleet charged directly at his superior numbers. What are they doing? Vex demanded from his command throne. Don't they understand mathematics? We outnumber them 4-1? His tactical officer, a nervous Crotac named Zool, studied his readings. Sir, their approach vector makes no sense. They're not following any known battle formation. It's like they're just making it up as they go along. The first exchange of fire lit up space with brilliant flashes. Crotoc plasma beams met human railgun rounds in a deadly light show. But something was wrong. The humans weren't fighting like any civilized species the Crotoc had ever encountered. Sir, Zool shouted in panic. The human ship Texas just rammed straight through our battle line. They're firing in all directions, while spinning like a tornado. Captain Rodriguez watched in amazement as Admiral Harrison's dreadnought carved through the Crotoc formation like a chainsaw through paper. The Texas was taking massive damage, but it was dealing out even more punishment. To every enemy ship, it passed. All fighters, this is Lieutenant Colonel Steve Murphy, came another voice over the comm. Follow me in. We're going to show these aliens how humans fight. Rodriguez watched as 30 human fighter craft dove straight into the middle of the Crotoc fleet.
Fleet.
Any sane pilot would have used hit-and-run tactics against such overwhelming numbers. The humans flew directly into the heaviest concentration of enemy fire, dodging and weaving through explosions that would have vaporized most ships. "Captain, the Krodak are trying to hail us," Betty Ross reported. "Put them through," Rodriguez ordered. Commander Vex's face appeared on the main screen, his usual confidence replaced by confusion and growing fear. "Human vessels, this is Commander Vex of the Krotak Empire. You are severely outnumbered. Withdraw now, and we will allow you to leave unharmed." Rodriguez actually laughed at the alien commander. "You've got to be kidding me. You spent 6 months bombing innocent civilians, and now you want to negotiate? You don't understand," Vex insisted. "My forces have conquered 47 star systems. We are the dominant military power in this sector. You cannot possibly win this battle." "Maybe," Rodriguez replied, watching as human boarding pods began attaching themselves to Krodak ships like ticks on a dog. "But we're going to make you pay for every inch." The first boarding action began aboard a Krodak cruiser called Death's Edge. Lieutenant Amy Chen led 12 Marines through a hole they had literally blasted in the enemy hull. The Krodo crew inside were wearing environmental suits, having sealed their ship against human boarders. "Contacts ahead," Sergeant Billy Hayes shouted as armored Krodo soldiers appeared in the corridor. The firefight was brief and brutal. Human assault rifles fired explosive rounds designed to work in space, while Krodak energy weapons created brilliant flashes in the ship's corridors. But the Krodak had never fought enemies who treated boarding actions like urban warfare. "Move, move, move," Chun yelled as her Marines used their momentum to push deeper into the ship. The Krodak fought bravely, but they were used to civilized warfare with rules and protocols. The humans fought like they were clearing buildings in a war zone. Within 20 minutes, Lieutenant Chen was standing on the bridge of Death's Edge, looking down at the captured Krodak crew. The alien captain stared up at her in shock. "What are you?" he gasped through his translator. "What kind of species fights like this?" Chen removed her helmet, revealing a young woman with steel in her eyes. "We're humans, pal. We're from a world where everything tries to kill us from the day we're born. Fighting is what we do best." Back on his flagship, Commander Vex watched in horror as his perfectly organized battle formation dissolved into chaos. Human ships were everywhere, fighting with a ferocity he had never encountered. They rammed his vessels when their weapons ran out of ammunition. They used nuclear weapons like they were fireworks. They boarded his ships and fought hand-to-hand in the corridors. "Sir, we've lost 16 ships in the first hour," Zal reported, his voice shaking. "The humans they're not fighting like any civilized species. They're fighting like like wild animals." Vex gripped his command throne as another explosion rocked his ship. For the first time in his military career, the great conqueror of 47 worlds was experiencing something he had never felt before: fear. The twisted metal corridors of the Krodak battlecruiser Iron Fist glowed with deadly radiation as Colonel Steve Wilson and his Marines pushed deeper into the ship. Warning alarms screamed in the alien language, and emergency lights cast eerie shadows on the walls. The air was thick with toxic gases from damaged life support systems. "Radiation levels are off the charts, Colonel," Sergeant Rita Hayes reported, checking her armor's sensors. "Any normal species would be dead in 30 seconds. Wilson smiled grimly inside his helmet. "Good thing we're not normal, then. Keep moving." The human Marines moved through the poisonous environment like they were walking through a park. There. Powered armor wasn't just military equipment. It was survival gear designed for a planet where hurricanes could flatten cities and volcanic eruptions could block out the sun for months. Earth had taught humans to thrive in conditions that would kill most galactic civilizations. "Contact front," shouted Private Danny Torres as a group of Krotok soldiers appeared around a corner, wearing bulky environmental suits to protect them. From their own ship's failing systems, the firefight lasted less than a minute. The Krodak moved slowly in their heavy protective gear, while the humans darted between cover like they were born for this kind of combat, because in many ways they were. "These suits are incredible," gasped a captured Krodak officer as Wilson's Team secured the engineering section. How can you function in this radiation? The temperature readings show levels that should cook your internal organs. Wilson removed his helmet, breathing the ship's toxic air without any protection. The aliens stared in shock as the humans showed no signs of discomfort. Where we come from? This is a mild day, Wilson replied. Should see what we deal with. During hurricane season, 3 decks above, Captain Jennifer Lee stood on the bridge of the destroyer Montana, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. The Crodoc fleet that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries was falling apart before her eyes. Captain, I'm reading massive explosions on the Crodoc flagship, reported Weapons Officer Pete Richardson. This looks like Colonel Martinez's boarding team just reached their reactor room. Through the view screen, Lee could see the massive enemy. Dreadnought World Crusher, venting atmosphere and spinning out of control. The ship had been the pride of the Crodoc fleet, a symbol of their unstoppable conquest. Now it was just another piece of space junk. Ma'am, we're getting distress calls from Crodoc ships across the system. Communications Officer Lisa Torres announced they're requesting permission to withdraw. Lee almost laughed. 6 hours ago, these same aliens had been confident conquerors, preparing to wipe out an entire peaceful civilization. Now they were begging to run away from a human fleet. They outnumbered 4-1. Patch me through to Admiral Harrison, Lee ordered. On the main screen, Admiral Harrison appeared from the bridge of his dreadnought Texas. The ship showed battle damage, scorch marks on the hull, and several burned-out weapon systems, but it was still fighting. Admiral, the Crotac are breaking on all fronts, Lee reported. 17 commanders are offering to surrender. What are your orders? Harrison looked tired but determined. Behind him, his bridge crew worked frantically too. Coordinate the battle. Sparks flew from damaged control panels, and the smell of smoke filled the air. But nobody looked defeated. Tell them they can surrender to the Villani people they tried to murder, Harrison said coldly. We're not here to accept prisoners. We're here to make sure bullies learn there are consequences. On the Crotac flagship Devastator, Commander Vex clutched his command throne as another explosion rocked his ship. His perfect battle plan had turned into a nightmare. The humans fought like nothing he had ever encountered, not like civilized soldiers following rules of war, but like wild predators defending their territory. Sir, the human ship Arizona just destroyed our heavy cruiser Paingiver with a single shot, his tactical officer reported. How is that possible? Vex looked at the tactical display, showing human vessels dancing between his ships like fighters. In a boxing ring, it took damage that should have crippled them and kept fighting. They used weapons in ways that defied military logic. They seemed to actually enjoy the chaos of battle. These aren't soldiers, Vex whispered in horror. These are monsters. As if to prove his point, a group of human fighters screamed past his view screen, chasing a fleeing Crotoc squadron. The human pilots were pulling turns that should have crushed them against their cockpit walls, but they kept coming like unstoppable machines. Sir, engineering reports critical damage to our main reactor, another officer announced. We need to evacuate immediately. For the first time in his career, spanning 47 conquered worlds, Commander Vex gave the order he never thought he would speak. All ships, full retreat, abandon the sector. Back on Earth, President Rachel Davis watched the battle reports. From the Pentagon War Room, the numbers still seemed impossible. 57 human ships had just defeated over 200 Crotac vessels in direct combat. How are we winning? Asked General Mike Thompson, staring at the tactical displays in disbelief. Defense Secretary Janet Cooper smiled as she read the latest reports. Because we're not fighting their kind of war, General. We're fighting our kind of war. The Crodoc are used to bullying peaceful civilizations that surrender after a few threats. They've never faced anyone who hits back harder. On Villani Prime, Ambassador Kyle Morrison stood in his damaged command center, watching human ships chase the retreating Crodoc fleet out of his system. The aliens who had seemed so terrifying just hours before were now running like scared children. From an enemy they couldn't understand, the humans hadn't come with superior numbers or advanced technology. They had come with something far more dangerous, the absolute refusal to back down from a fight, no matter what the odds. As the last Krotok ships disappeared into hyperspace, Morrison realized that the galaxy had just learned a very important lesson. When you mess with innocent people, you might find yourself face to face with the most dangerous species in known space. And humans didn't believe in fighting fair. The repair yards above Villani Prime buzzed with activity as human and alien engineers worked side by side. Admiral Jack Harrison walked through the corridors of his flagship Texas, inspecting the damage from 3 months of continuous fighting. Scorch marks covered the walls where Krodak energy weapons had burned through the hull. Emergency patches sealed dozens of holes that had once been doorways or viewing ports. "Admiral, the final casualty reports are in," Captain Dan Rodriguez said as he joined Harrison on the observation deck. "We lost 9 ships total, with 43 damaged but repairable. Considering we were outnumbered 4-1. Those numbers are miraculous," Harrison finished, looking out at the peaceful, blue world below. "Though I'm not sure the families of our fallen crew members would call it that." Through the massive windows, they could see Villani's cities rebuilding themselves. Construction crews worked around the clock to repair the damage from the Krotak bombardment. More importantly, they could see something else. Hope. The Villani people had survived. Their children would grow up free, their culture would continue, and their peaceful way of life would endure. That's what 4,800 human soldiers had died for, and Harrison knew in his heart it was worth it. Ambassador Kyle Morrison is requesting permission to come aboard, Communications Officer Betty Ross announced over the ship's intercom. "He says he has something important to present to you." 20 minutes later, Morrison stood in the Texas main conference room, holding a crystalline object that seemed to capture and reflect light in impossible ways. The Villani ambassador looked healthier than he had in months. The constant fear and stress had faded from his face, replaced by something Harrison had rarely seen in the galaxy: genuine gratitude. "Admiral Harrison, this is the crystal of eternal friendship," Morrison explained, his voice filled with emotion. "In our culture's 3,000-year history, it has only been awarded 12 times. It represents a debt that can never be repaid, a friendship that will last forever." Harrison accepted the crystal, feeling its surprising warmth against his hands. "Ambassador, we didn't do this for rewards or recognition. We did it because it was the right thing to do." "And that," Morrison replied, "is exactly why you deserve this more than anyone else in galactic history." The ceremony was brief. Humans weren't much for long speeches and fancy protocols, but the meaning was clear to everyone present. Earth had earned its place among the stars, not through conquest or superior technology, but through an act of pure moral courage, as the human fleet prepared for departure. Something unprecedented began happening across the galaxy. The news of humanity's victory over the Krodak Empire spread like wildfire through every communication network. Every trading post, every diplomatic channel, species that had never heard of Earth suddenly wanted to know everything about these Deathworlders, who had done the impossible. The same galactic databases that had once marked humanity as dangerous, primitive, now carried a different warning. Allies of Earth are under human protection. On the bridge of his command ship, former Krodak Commander Vex sat in chains, waiting for trial by the Galactic Justice Council. The mighty empire that had conquered 47 star systems was now scattered across the outer rim, hiding in asteroid fields and abandoned space stations. "How did this happen?" Vex asked his guard, a young Villani security officer. "We had superior numbers, better technology, centuries of military experience. How did we lose to such a young species?" The guard looked at him with a mixture of pity and disgust. "Because you made one crucial mistake, Commander. You assumed that being civilized meant being weak. Forgot that sometimes the most civilized thing you can do is stand up to bullies." Back on Earth, President Rachel Davis stood in the Oval Office, reading Admiral Harrison's final report. The document was remarkably short for such a historic mission. Humans preferred action to paperwork. "The Krodak threat has been neutralized," she read aloud to her advisors. "The Villani people are safe. Mission accomplished. Requesting permission to return home." Defense Secretary Janet Cooper smiled as she looked at the intelligence reports. "Flooding in from across the galaxy, Madam President, we're receiving diplomatic inquiries from over 30 different species. They all want to establish formal relations with Earth. Any interesting offers? The president asked. Zephyrian. Alliance is offering a full military partnership, Cooper reported. The Cosmic Federation wants to discuss trade agreements. And the Stellar Republic has formally apologized for not taking our calls during the crisis. President Davis laughed. The same galactic powers that had ignored Earth's messages were now desperate to be humanity's best friend. What's our response? Going to be, Secretary of State Robert Kim cleared his throat. I suggest we be polite but cautious, ma'am. We've learned that when the chips are down, we're pretty much on our own out there. 3 days later, the first human ship appeared in Earth's solar system after the longest military deployment in human history. As the fleet approached Luna Base, they were met by thousands of civilian ships, cargo haulers, passenger liners, private yachts, and even school field trip vessels. Everyone wanted to welcome home the heroes who had put humanity on the galactic map, but the most important welcome came from a simple radio transmission that reached every ship in the returning fleet. It was President Davis herself, speaking directly to the tired soldiers who had traveled across the galaxy to help strangers. Welcome home, heroes, her voice carried across space. You left Earth as explorers and soldiers. Return as the founding fathers and mothers of humanity's place among the stars. Because of what you did out there, no innocent species will ever face extinction alone again. The galaxy now knows that when good people call for help, humans will answer. Admiral Harrison sat in his command chair one last time, looking at the beautiful blue marble that was home. Earth looked exactly the same as when they had left 6 months ago, but everything had changed. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe. They had become the species that other civilizations called when evil needed. To be stopped, the age of human exploration was over. The age of human responsibility had begun, and across the galaxy. In 1,000 different languages and on 1,000,000 different worlds, the message was spreading: the humans are our friends. They came when we called. They will come when others call. Choose your targets wisely. The galaxy would never be the same again.